Hello all, my name is Yossi, and in today's short lesson we will examine the claim that Zachariah 12:10 is a prophecy about Jesus. This lesson is dedicated to the memories of my parents, my father and teacher Abraham Shmuel ben Simcha Bunim, and my mother and teacher Hannah bat Shimon. Zachariah 12:10 is a very important proof text for Christians. In it they see a direct reference to Jesus' crucifixion. See John chapter 19 verse 37. So what I'd like to do today is to read through the 14 verses of chapter 12 so that we can see how well this chapter fits the Jesus story. And instead of me translating, we're going to just read from the KJV. Verse 1. The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, which stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. Verse 3. And in that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment, and his rider with madness, and I will open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. Verse 5. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength in the Lord of hosts, their God. In that day I will make the governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf. And they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left. And Jerusalem shall be inhabited against her own place, again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. Verse 7. The Lord shall save the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, as the angel of the Lord before them. Verse 9. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. Verse 10. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. In that day shall there be a great mourning in Jerusalem, as the mourning of Hadalimon in the valley of Megiddon. And the land shall mourn, every family apart, the family of the house of David apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart. The family of the house of Levi apart, and their wives apart, the family of Shimei apart, and their wives apart. And the last verse, verse 14, all the families that remain, every family apart, and their wives apart. Okay, so what do we have? Sometime in the future, all of the nations will come up to besiege the land of Judah and Jerusalem. When this happens, God himself will fight for Jerusalem. He will strengthen the people of Judah and the people of Jerusalem, and he will save the inhabitants of Jerusalem in such a way the house of David will not feel aggrandized. Not only that, the weakest fighter in Jerusalem will be like King David himself, and the house of David will be like God before the attacking enemies. After this epic battle, there will be a great mourning for whom they have pierced, and there will be a great mourning in Jerusalem and throughout the land. So how does this exactly apply to Jesus? Did all the nations besiege Jerusalem in Jesus' time? Was Jerusalem so phenomenally victorious in Jesus' time? Were the people of Jerusalem so powerful in defeating their enemies in Jesus' time? Was there mourning in every household in Jesus' time? Well, the answer to all of these questions is no. So the Christian apologists have to say that this is indeed what it is. It's a future event, a prophecy of a future event, which, it is. The presentation of this event as a future event, however, is in total contradiction with John 19:37, who presents this event as applying to Jesus on the cross, an event long past. Well, this is problem number 1 of 5 problems that we have with this verse. The second problem is the obvious, that you can't bring a proof from an event that hasn't happened yet. The third problem with this verse is the misleading translation of the word dakaru. This word does not mean pierced, it means stabbed. And that fits perfectly with the rest of the passage, which talks about a raging battle around Jerusalem. The fourth problem is one of simple reading comprehension. Again, the KJV translates the relevant part of verse 10 as follows: "And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son." So Christians explain that the me in this verse, "they shall look upon me," is the one who is pierced. They then conclude that the only person that could possibly refer to is Jesus. Well, the reason for this misunderstanding stems from, surprise, another mistranslation. The relevant phrase of this verse in Hebrew is "Ve'bitu alai et asher dakaru v'savdu alav kemisped et al hayachid," and the word "et" in this phrase means with, like in Genesis 37:2. "V'haya ro'et echav betzon v'hu nar et bnei bilha ve'et bnei zinpa," was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah. Judges 17:11. "V'yoel halevi l'shevet et ha'ish," and the Levite was content to dwell with the man. Isaiah 57:15. "Et daka ushval ruach," with him also that is of a contrite and humble spirit. In other words, the phrase says something like, "And they shall look towards me with those who were stabbed," with or concerning. The fifth major problem with the Christian understanding of this verse is an understandable but kind of misleading kind of translation. As a reminder, the KJV translates the beginning of verse 10 as follows: "And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem." The word for inhabitants in the original Hebrew is yoshev, but yoshev means inhabitant, not inhabitants. But it's correct to translate it that way as plural. And further in the verse, the prophet says, "And they shall mourn for him, and shall be in bitterness for him." Well, there's no reason, not at all, to understand all three singular verbs in the plural. That's the language of the prophet. So finally, the chapter describes a tremendous battle against Jerusalem. Surely it makes more sense for the mourners in this verse to mourn for those slain in that battle rather than for someone who died 2,000 years or more beforehand. "And he will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. And they shall look toward me with those who have been stabbed, and they shall mourn for them as one mourns for his only son, and shall be bitterness for them as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn." Thank you, Kol Tuv, and God bless.